Good evening, and welcome to Illinois PTA's Advocacy Day webinar series. This is our fourth and final webinar in this series, and it's our Hot Topics briefing. We will be talking about the issues that we will be advocating for on November 15th in Springfield as part of our Advocacy Day. I am Brian Minsker, President-elect for the Illinois PTA, and joining me here this evening as a co-presenter is Lisa Garbati, our Legislative Advocacy Director. Say hello, Lisa.
Good evening, everyone.
Okay, we're going to start with PTA's mission, which is to make every child's potential a reality by engaging and empowering families and communities to advocate for all children. This mission is our guide for everything we do in PTA. We are an advocacy organization first and foremost. It's why we were founded almost 120 years ago, to advocate for children because no one else was doing so. Our three focus issues on Advocacy Day this coming Tuesday will be the state budget, Senate Bill 550, which addresses lead in school drinking water, and House Bill 5726, which is supported by our 2013 resolution on energy drinks. We're going to cover what we're asking legislators for each of these topics, and then we're going to cover some talking points that you can use when you're speaking to them as well. When it comes with a budget, it's certainly the topic that has dominated things in the state for over a year. We have not passed a budget since fiscal year 2015, and we are now in fiscal year 2017. We are asking the legislature for three things regarding the budget. One, pass a comprehensive, fully funded budget. Two, ensure that it provides adequate, equitable, and sustainable funding for programs for children and families. And three, increase revenues to the state. So let's give you a little background on this issue and cover our talking points that we want you to share with our legislators. Now, we're going to start with how we got to where we are right now. On January 1st, 2015, just before Governor Rauner took office, the state income tax rate decreased from 5% to 3.75% as the temporary increase that was passed by the legislature and signed by Governor Quinn in 2011 expired. The result was a decrease of about $4.7 billion in state revenues. That spring, the governor and the legislature could not pass a budget for fiscal year 2016, which began on July 1st, 2015. And while there was a temporary spending measure passed late in June of this year, just before the beginning of the fiscal year 2017, it was not a comprehensive budget, it was a stopgap measure. And the state does not currently have a budget for fiscal year 2017. Kindergarten through 12th grade funding was passed as part of that stopgap measure and in the previous year as well, in part because failing to do so would have had the majority of school districts across the state shutting their doors this year without it. The state has also continued some other funding, even though there is no lack of a budget, or there is a lack of a budget. Some of these items are required by law, such as the state's pension obligations and its state-run dental insurance payments, but that doesn't mean that those obligations have been paid, only that they will be paid eventually, often with interest as well. Other items have been paid as a result of court orders, such as state employees' salaries. The net result of this situation is that the state has cut billions of dollars from its budget without any debate or public input on the worth of those cuts, and largely without any vote by the General Assembly. What are these cuts? Note that the ones that we have listed here are only some of the larger cuts. There are many more smaller cuts to a much larger list of categories than what we have here. Higher education in Illinois has been cut by $1.318 billion, that's with a B, a 67.9% cut from fiscal year 2015, the last year we had a fully funded budget. These cuts have been particularly devastating to the smaller state universities. And the funding uncertainty has led to lower enrollments this fall at many of those campuses. This causes further financial difficulties for those institutions as they have less tuition coming in as well to help pay for their operations. Human Services have seen a cut of $508 million, a $500 million, a 10.2% cut over fiscal year 2015. These cuts include programs such as Teen Reach after-school programs, Meals on Wheels, bilingual education services, and substance abuse and treatment and prevention programs. Public safety is another area that has been cut significantly. $467 million, a 27.3% cut from fiscal year 2015. Among the programs cut in this area are Redeploy Illinois, which is a diversion program for nonviolent youth. The cost to incarcerate youth in juvenile facilities instead of using Redeploy Illinois is almost 20 times the cost. So we are not only not saving money, or not only do we have a higher cost of doing this, we are not saving money by using the Redeploy Illinois program to help divert nonviolent youth from prison. Healthcare has seen cuts of $364 million, 5.5% cut from fiscal year 2015. These cuts include programs such as teen pregnancy prevention, breast cancer and cervical cancer screening for low-income women, and the autism program, which is a national leader in autism support services. Yet despite these and all the other cuts that we've seen, the state budget deficit grew by $3.44 billion over fiscal year 2015, a 57% increase. In addition, this year's deficit is projected to grow by between $6 and $8 billion, which will be another about 50% increase over what our budget deficit is at this point in time. This is why the state needs to increase revenue. Here's a more comprehensive but still not complete list of programs that have been cut due to the lack of a budget. This was put together by Voices for Illinois Children, and you can find this information at their website of voicesforkids.org and clicking on the Fiscal Policy Center button at the top right of their homepage. Note that it includes other things like violence protection for families with young kids, home visit programs, education and employment programs for adults, a disability resource hotline, centers for independent living, in-home and community-based senior care, sexual assault services and prevention, public transport operating assistance grants, reentry and rehabilitation services, soil and water conservation districts, tuition MAP grants have been partially funded from last year, but this year are again being floated by the universities. The Illinois State Museums have seen cuts, homeless youth services, homeless supportive housing, homeless prevention assistance, and the list goes on and on. Now let's talk a little bit about increasing revenue. As we said a few minutes ago, despite the huge budget cuts the state has seen, the budget deficit had grown by 57% over fiscal year 2015. The state has to increase revenue. The Illinois PTA legislative platform supports both increases in the income tax rate to provide essential services for children and family, as well as consideration of taxing services under the state sales tax. Let's take a quick look at those two options. This map was put together by the Tax Foundation, which is an independent organization, and if you can read it on your screen, Illinois has a flat income tax rate of 3.75%, which is the fourth lowest among the 43 states that have an income tax. This rate is also significantly lower than that of other large states that Illinois is often compared to. California has a top income tax rate of 13.3%, and New York has a top income tax rate of 8.82%. The General Assembly in Illinois can vote to increase the tax rate, just as they did back in 2011 to increase it to 5%. But to move from a flat tax to a graduated income tax would require a constitutional amendment. This next chart looks at taxes on services and was put together by the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability. One of the common criticisms you'll hear about taxing services is that people who live near a state border will cross the state line to avoid the tax. But as this chart shows, there are many services in Illinois that could be taxed before the list of services is comparable to our neighbors. Increasing the number of services taxed by the state is an important approach to generating revenue for the state because our economy has become increasingly service-oriented. It is necessary to adapt our tax structure to reflect the current economy that we have, not one from 50 years ago. where we had more manufacturing and sales items. Final point we want to make with legislators is that education is an investment. Walter W. McMahon, who's an emeritus professor at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in both economics and in education, recently calculated the return on investment of education spending by the state of Illinois. He found that K-12 education has a return on investment of 9.5%, while community colleges offering a two-year degree have a 12.9% return on investment, and four-year colleges and universities have a 12.3% return on investment. For comparison, over that same time period, the Standard & Poor's 500 stock index had a return on investment of only 7.2%. Investing in education is better for the state than investing in the stock market during an historically high period of market growth. It is truly a valuable investment for the state. In addition, the result of this high rate of return on state spending on education is that every dollar that Illinois spends on education is paid back to the state in 2.3 years. It's literally one of the best investments the state can make. We're now going to talk about Senate Bill 550, and I'm going to turn that over to Lisa.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you for bringing those budget issues and the importance of revenue and increasing it to our attention. So next we're going to be talking about Senate Bill 550. This is a bill that the Illinois PTA is currently supporting in connection with the health hazard of lead. This is a known toxin, and the bill is also known as the Lead in Drinking Water Prevention Act. Now, lead is a known health hazard, particularly to children. I'm going to go into more details about the impact of lead in a little while when I review our talking points. What does Senate Bill 550 seek to do? We'll talk about that first. This bill requires that the Department of Public Health adopt specific rules concerning the identification of lead service lines and plumbing in those schools that pose in schools and where it would pose a health hazard, and to determine ways to mitigate those health hazards. Additionally, it requires the testing of representative samples of each potable water source in every school by December 2019. And importantly, in addition to an increase in the testing and monitoring, this legislation would also seek to replace lead service lines and require reporting on the problem's scope. The problem that we have with lead in public water is not limited to what we find in the news. For example, about a year or so ago in Flint, Michigan. According to the Chicago Tribune, excessive lead has been found in approximately 170 public water systems in Illinois. Communities in Galesburg, Chicago, Berwyn, Forest View, York Township, Barrington, and Volo have been found to have exceeded the EPA standard of 15 parts per billion in previous years. It was recently recommended that Galesburg, Illinois, provide bottled water or filters to residents where there were high levels of lead found in drinking water. And something else that's important to note is that Chicago has a lead poisoning rate that is at least twice as high as the national average. And this is particularly so among minority children, whose rates of lead poisoning may be up to 6 times the city average. So, what is our ask? Our ask is what we want those elected officials to do. In the case of Senate Bill 550, the Lead in Drinking Water Prevention Act, we want our representatives to sign on as co-sponsors for the bill and then to vote in favor of it when the bill comes to the floor. Now, we do already have 3 representatives who are co-sponsoring it, but the more people that co-sponsor it, the stronger the bill becomes. The 3 representatives who are currently co-sponsoring it are Sonia Harper, Robin Gable, and Ann Williams. Now, since this bill's already passed the Senate, when you meet with your senators, all you really need to do is to thank them for voting in favor of the bill, if that's what they did. When you check your senator's scorecard that's located at the Illinois PTA Advocacy tab at illinoispta.org, you can find out whether they voted in favor of the measure, against it, or in some cases they may not have voted at all. Okay, now I'm going to go through some of the talking points for you to bring to your state representative in your discussions with them. We're also going to have written out talking points for you when you meet with us in Springfield. First and foremost, there is no safe level of lead exposure according to the American Academy of Pediatrics. The level that is given of 15 parts per billion is an amount set by the EPA as an action level, but any level is an actual danger. The dangerous lead levels impact directly on school performance and social engagement issues. Exposure to lead is known to lower IQ, decrease academic performance, cause inattention, impulsive behavior, aggressive behavior, and hyperactivity. Another point is that preventing lead exposure is less expensive than treating the resulting health and behavior issues. In a recent report, the American Academy of Pediatrics stated that preventing children's exposure to lead will save billions of dollars in annual costs associated with that exposure in the United States. As one example that they gave in the report, it was assessed that for every $1 invested in lead hazard reductions in housing units, the society itself would benefit by an estimated $17 to $221. Now, just in general, before we address a problem, we need to know the source and perhaps the scope, obviously, of the problem. When we're talking about lead, we need to know that it previously came from many sources, including paint and gasoline. In a 2007 paper entitled Environmental Policy as Social Policy, The Impact of Childhood Lead Exposure on Crime by Jessica Walpole-Reyes, the researcher concluded that exposure to lead in childhood can cause psychological deficits that lead to aggressive and criminal behavior. She found that the reduction in childhood lead exposure that came with the implementation of the Clean Air Act, an act that required the removal of lead from gasoline, correlated with a significant decline in violent crime the following decade. As you may also know, lead exposure or lead itself was also found in connection with paint, household paint. In poorer neighborhoods, which might not have been well maintained, the lead paint would chip. Children could have access to the lead by eating that chipped paint. Today, lead has largely been removed from gasoline and paint. Exposure, however, is still possible through a substance that we all need and use, water. SB 550, Senate Bill 550, adds the necessary measures that we need to further protect our children from exposure to this dangerous toxin. I'm now going to move on to our last issue for our conference, and that is going to be energy drinks. Currently, there is a House Bill 5726, that is sitting in rules and has been, frankly, for some time. House Bill 5726 does two very simple things. It defines what an energy drink is, and it seeks to ban the sale or provision of an energy drink to anyone under the age of 18. So why are we concerned with this? Well, the adverse health effects reported with energy drink use include seizures, mania, stroke, and sudden death. The American Academy of Pediatrics has recognized and stated that there is no place for energy drinks in the diet of children and youth. So what is our ask here? Okay, so the ask, as I mentioned earlier, just to keep you on track, is what we want our elected officials to do. So for the energy drinks issue, our ask to our representatives is for two things, and if we actually need it, three. So first and foremost, we want each representative to sign on as a bill co-sponsor. That will give it added weight and strength. We also want them to seek to have the bill moved out of the Rules Committee and brought to the floor for a vote. If, however, the bill fails to pass in the 99th General Assembly, and because of certain time constraints that we're dealing with now at the end of this session, that is still a possibility, then we want a similar bill to be introduced in the next session. To our senators, our ask is that they sign on as a co-sponsor for this bill, and if needed, to introduce similar legislation in the Senate. So, here's a few talking points on the issue of energy drinks and youth. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, energy drinks should not be consumed by children and youth because of the dangerous levels of caffeine. Another issue, another point to make. The level of caffeine in energy drinks can be as high in some instances as the amount contained in 14 cans of caffeinated soda. Another point that you can make to your legislator. The serious adverse health effects reported in association with energy drink use include seizures, mania, stroke, and sudden death. And yet, studies have found that 30 to 50% of adolescents consume energy drinks. That is despite those dangers. 46% of caffeine overdoses in 2007 occurred in children and youths under the age of 19. Caffeine is one of the most commonly used psychoactive drugs worldwide, and it may be the only psychoactive drug available over the counter to children here in the form of an energy drink. And finally, the Powdered Caffeine Control Act, which was passed last year with overwhelming support, set forth the known dangers of caffeine's impact on minors. Certainly, it stands to reason that energy drinks, which are known to contain dangerous levels of caffeine, should not be sold or distributed to minors. That concludes our presentation for the evening. We'll now take any questions. Remember to unmute yourselves. Okay.
Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay. Want to thank you for attending. Be sure to go to illinoispta.org to register for Advocacy Day in Springfield on November 15th. We will be there from 9:30 a.m. to 2 p.m. Stop by any time in the Capitol Rotunda and find the Illinois PTA table. You need to pre-register by Sunday, November 13th, because the pre-registered attendees will be getting free Illinois PTA business cards to leave with legislators. But if you don't pre-register, you can still come. We will have materials for you to share with your legislator, and we will have talking points as well for you to use. And we will have experienced PTA advocates who can tag along with you or you can tag along with to see how to meet with a legislator, and who can tag along with you to your meeting. If you have any questions, feel free to email either Lisa or myself at the email addresses here on the screen. You can also find these on the Illinois PTA website along with the rest of the State Board of Directors at illinoispta.org, and clicking on the About menu tab and then the Governance menu item on the left. Thank you again for joining our fourth and final webinar series on hot topics, and we look forward to seeing many of you in Springfield on November 15th between 9:30 a.m. and 2 p.m. in the Capitol Rotunda. See you then.